Well, thanks for coming on, Sophie. Really appreciate you coming onto the podcast. We got to know you with working with you of late, and I thought it'd be really great to get you on. I think there's some great insights into marketing for people who would listen. So thanks for agreeing to come on and share your story.
No worries. Thanks for welcoming me on.
So could you start with what we do in the podcast? It's very much about the people, their journey, challenges. So I'll tend to sit in the background and let you go. But can you tell us a bit about yourself and how you've got to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. So originally I'm actually from Yorkshire, so I'll start off with a bit of a personal bio. I'm from Yorkshire, but I've been into Newcastle for 20 years now. I came up here for university as reasonably immature 18-year-old and learned a lot quite quickly that way. I did business marketing at uni, and that's like a big part of what I'll come on to in terms of my story and how I've got to where I am today. In terms of personality, I'm a very active person. Anything to do with sports, being outside, and just moving about and generally keeping fit and active. I am a little bit of a coffee addict. Cheese addict maybe as well. So often I find me lurking around any kind of cheese board at events or coffee machines. I'm always kind of around there. Come and say hi if you do see me.
It's quite handy for the networking events with a coffee, isn't it? Because it's like I suppose like the office water cooler when you're at networking events. The coffee machine's the place to go.
The coffee machine, you'll definitely find me at. Although I will say, kudos to Maximise, because they also offered cheese. So not only did I get coffee, I also got a mid-morning Bayville cheese snack, so that was good. But yeah, if I'm at the coffee machine, it's an easy place to spot me and come over and meet and say hi. So I guess that's a bit about me personally. Just going back to like how I came to Newcastle, so that's on the business and marketing degree. And that's where I really kind of found like what I wanted to do and what I enjoyed. I'd done psychology at A-level, and once I started to progress through the marketing side of my degree, I really started to understand around like consumer behaviour and what that actually meant, and that's where I took a real interest. And in the third year at uni, we did a piece around, at the time it was called direct marketing, which is as close as it got to digital back in those days. But a lot of it was around data. So what I really enjoyed and still do really enjoy is looking at data in terms of how audiences behave. So not just looking at kind of affinities and interests, but actually user behaviour and anything from how somebody interacts with the digital material through to quite sophisticated tracking in terms of how people are looking at like digital signage and out of home opportunities. That's really where the focus of my enjoyment comes from, and looking at those two things combined across kind of marketing.
Is that a bit of sort of a reflection of you as a person, as in all elements of your life? You're very sort of like, you like that structured data and connection.
Yeah, as a person, I'm incredibly structured, and if I looked at those two combined, like I've done a lot of like psychometric kind of profilings over the years. So I've been lucky enough that the roles that I've had have been able to offer me that. And logic always comes out quite high, logic, data, detail driven, but also like in terms of kind of like sociability as well, and behaviours and interest and curiosity. And that's another side of me that also comes out in those pieces. So yeah, I think it does sum me up quite well, and it was pretty sweet to figure that out at quite a young age, that those are the things that I did actually enjoy. But yeah, structure, I think it comes from that combination of logic and then kind of behaviours and what you need to do to get from A to B. Like fundamentally, I always describe myself as a problem solver. And I think that's exactly where it comes from, is like looking at something for kind of all the details that it's got, and then how you can get from one point to the other across that and solve the problem. And that includes anything from working with a business and working with its objectives and the challenges they're seeing to kind of overcome those, and what that means in a marketing sense with their customers or with their data, or perhaps some of their activity that's not working as it should be, right through to like your Christmas cracker puzzles that you get. Like, they entertain me endlessly on Christmas Day, like figuring those sorts of things out. So I do really enjoy puzzles and problem solving generally as a person.
It's interesting that bit of, because people at university doing their degrees, I think it would be interesting statistic, but I bet there's a lot of people that don't know this is what I want to do, and this is what the field I want to go into.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people sort of think, well, all right, I'm going to get a degree because I'm going to get the knowledge. I'm going to show that I can learn at that level, but I'm not quite sure where I want to go yet. So it's interesting that you had that, and I suppose that highlights that sort of structured and sort of planning part of your personality, that you pretty much had that boxed off by that point.
Yeah, I mean, like, I wouldn't say like in the moment I necessarily reflected as clearly as that now, but there's certain projects that kind of I did throughout uni that just I was like, God, that's really interesting. I would love to do that as a job, or I'd love to kind of look at these things within side of marketing. And some of them were like, you know, more business orientated. They weren't necessarily just marketing, but there was definite distinct moments where I was like, these are the things that I really enjoy. But I did go to uni and have absolutely, like most people do, no idea what they wanted to do, even though it's quite a specific kind of add-on to my degree. I think about 13 or 14, so I said at the start I like being active, and I came home from school and we'd done an away day with an army training camp, which sounds incredibly militant. I didn't go to a military school. And I came home and announced that I wanted to be in the army because that was great, because all you did all day was go around assault courses. To which I got met with, you do know that the army's not just about training on assault courses, right? So that quickly changed, and I actually wanted to be, for a long time, I wanted to be a lawyer. And that's how I got into the psychology side of things, in terms of understanding how people behaved in like criminal psychology, and even now like forensics and such like really kind of interest me from the point of view of why people behave and the patterns that forensics do leave, like digitally or pathology wise. Like that kind of side still sits there with me today.
So and I suppose having that interest in people's behaviours and psychology is automatically has that tie into marketing and marketing strategy, because you've got to understand all of that to really target how you communicate to people.
Yeah, exactly, and it benefits in a marketing sense, but also in some of the roles that I've had and now the way that I interact with businesses. It's a really useful skill and enjoyment almost, because you can understand the person that you're talking to, whether it's a stakeholder in a business, whether it's a peer or a colleague, or whether it is actually looking at customers and their behaviours. Like from those kind of three different angles, you can start to leverage the way people think, the way people act, etc. for like a more harmonious environment, essentially.
Excellent. So take us from university. You'd done what in this way. Take us where did things go from there?
So from there, I was fortunate. I got a role straight into a very, very small digital marketing agency that focused on organic search and paid search as well. As you can imagine, Google back in mid 2000s is quite different to how it operates now, but principally the cores, that's what I'll always say, those core elements haven't necessarily changed. It's just about obviously the way people behave around them. So I got that job and I did that for a couple of years, and then that agency wanted to branch out into affiliate marketing, which I didn't have any experience. Obviously it was my first job, so I got no experience, but what we were gifted with in Newcastle at the time was a big affiliate platform or affiliate network, and so I went and got a job at that network to learn more about it. I left the agency just because that proposition was never going to particularly take off, so I went to the agency, to their network, to learn all about affiliate marketing. And in there I got some really good exposure to some really big corporations. Like I worked with Asda, worked with Sky, some hotel chains, etc. And that showed me a lot of discipline around. That's where I really got hold of data and be able to kind of be disciplined into what you're trying to tell from data, not just having a load of numbers in front of you, but actually storytelling from data and having to tell a client actually what's going on with their account. So I really enjoyed that, and by this time I was like, okay, this is quite a good strategy actually for a career, because I'm going sort of, if you've got a table of marketing, I'm sort of going around the table, having a seat in lots of different areas. And I then moved on to a company called Sales Cycle, which was its first. I was quite proud to do that. It was the first of its kind in basket abandonment emails. So I think I was their fifth employee, and they're quite big now. So was very much there in the early days. And that obviously was around like retargeting, around emails, how to make a noise or an impact in somebody's inbox when they potentially left a shopping cart. And actually I combined two skills there. I combined my digital skills, but with my affiliate skills specifically, to be able to bring Sales Cycle into think it was one of the major networks at the time, and actually get them to operate inside of that network. And then moving forward from there, I moved to DFDS, which is they do Newcastle to Amsterdam and Dover, Calais, Dover, Dunkirk routes. Got about 9 different passenger routes across Europe. Went there as a little junior, adding some more strings to my bow with social media for the first time. Also digital media again in 2012 that was, so quite a different landscape back then, but digital media in its entirety, as well as kind of search and affiliates too. And I did that I was actually at DFDS for nearly 10 years, but inside of DFDS, what was great is they sort of went through cycles of optimization of the business quite frequently. So I grew quite a lot in that role. I was promoted to UK manager, then moved on to like European head of acquisition, head of distribution, marketing, and looked after teams across Europe. And it was a great role. I loved that job. That's where working with different stakeholders was quite common, because it was a freight logistics business by its majority, but then there was this passenger organisation side to it. So inside of that business, you would be talking to potentially somebody who has absolutely zero knowledge on digital marketing, zero real marketing knowledge, and that you were obviously giving them projections and forecasts for the years ahead and requesting budgets from those routes to be able to promote them. So really about education and showing performance, and actually, again, like blending that data and storytelling with them, the ability to understand people and how to kind of maneuver around difficult complexities in the business.
And you must have had quite a few challenges in a business that sort of size, spanning the different countries. You must have had quite a few challenges just sort of dealing with people and communication like through that.
Yeah, I mean, I think although it's a Danish organisation, its primary language is English, which was great for me. I've never had to learn a word of Danish in the whole 10 years, which isn't actually something I'm necessarily proud of, but it would have been a good opportunity. But it was English, but the biggest difference, of course, is culture.
That's what I was going to say. In a communication point, it's coming across people with different viewpoints and different cultures to how you get across what and get them to be on board with what you want them to be on board with.
Totally, and it was, it's a multi-matrix effect, because you've got cultural differences from a physical country and culture point of view, but then you've also got like passenger, which is B2C organisation, coming together with some of there were route directors, so some of those route directors that were predominantly, their routes were like 90% freight and logistics, for example, so they're in a B2B world, nothing to do with consumers at all. And then you also have different levels of like industry expertise as well. So within that as well, you have people that have been in the ferry industry for a very long time, people who are new to it, etc. So it's like a multi-matrix to that kind of cultural communication style that you have to adapt to. And I think that's probably one of the biggest opportunities that I had to really experience and learn lots of different cultures together, from being with colleagues that are around you in the UK, through to working with, a route director that's based in Lithuania, for example. There's massive contrast, and then how the Nordic culture obviously comes into play. It's that Nordic culture that's leading the organisation as well, but with all these different cultures being a part of it. So, yeah, it really makes you quite hot-footed in terms of your communication style and how you need to adapt.
That's something actually, because I do find it fascinating when not everyone knows the importance of culture in an organisation. But in large organisations, you've also got those subcultures of different departments and areas that are important to cultivate as well, and how you get them aligned with the overarching culture of the whole organisation. So I'm fascinated in that area on larger organisations.
Yeah, it's definitely a piece that you can unpick and sit and kind of analyse all day around it. Because if you just think of marketing just in this tiny spectrum of that whole organisation, you've got, even if you look at the difference in culture around traditional brand marketeers and more performance marketeers, for example, like there in itself, you've got 2 different cultures inside of one discipline. Then if you add all those layers of cultural difference in as well, instantly you kind of widen that every single time. And of course, not only internally, you've got the external culture of consumers and how they respond to media as well, and how they respond to different messaging, how they respond to different phrases that you use, like even just down to colours. And like we did a lot of training around different colours that can mean different things in different countries, and what to avoid in certain areas just because of either history, or it can be to do with like patriotism, or it can be anything, but that different, a colour that means nothing to us is quite significant in a different area.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and so DFDS sort of that went through till was that 2021, 22?
Yeah, so I was at DFDS throughout the start of the pandemic, which was interesting. Busy time, genuinely busy because of all the communications. Now, if you think culture was one thing to navigate, opening and closing of borders across 9 different routes was another thing to navigate, with different nationalities going on those routes. But yeah, I moved from there in September 2021, and the reason that I moved was I just wanted growth. I wanted to grow further, and an opportunity came up. I wasn't particularly active in the market at Hayes Travel, the UK's #1 travel agency, and a great job. That was a great role. It was to look after essentially the entire marketing function. So within Hayes, that remit spanned anything from web and digital performance right through to TV, radio, traditional channels, but also areas like retail marketing. So how you actually made your store a marketing canvas as well. And then they had obviously thousands of suppliers. There's thousands of different travel companies out there, but with essentially kind of a divisional setup of kind of like, you've got your cruise, you've got your land holidays, you've got recruitment campaigns going out for Hayes themselves, you've got foreign exchange in there. There's lots of different like dimensions to that role, and that was a big and busy role. They were also on quite a pathway in, I guess, 3 fronts. One, they'd acquired Thomas Cook in 2019, and that was still coming through, and they've done a brilliant job. When you look at that journey alone, that's a brilliant example of turning something into a complete positive.
I was just going to say, because that was big. That was big news as well as to what they were doing and how the positive story about that, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a brilliant story. Like, it's such a positive, and that's what they are, Hayes. Like, they are really like a positive, warm, people-orientated organisation. And they took over Thomas Cook stores and people, and I think it's probably the best way to define it, in October 2019. And obviously, within 6 months, of course, the pandemic was upon the world, not just Hayes, but the world. So their ability to turn around that Thomas Cook acquisition into a positive piece and a real driver for the business is obviously massive testament to the strength of their management and the people inside that organisation that can deliver that. So yes, Hayes were going through not only that transformation, they were also coming out the back of obviously the pandemic and things opening back up and bouncing back. Like, travel was something that as a trend was huge. Like, everybody was bursting at the seams to go on holiday. So things like frequency of holidays, values of holidays, added experiences on holidays, etc. Like, it was great, but of course it's still, in terms of like the pandemic, was still washing through right through to, well, a year or so later. But that role was it was also a transformational role as well, both for their business, but also I learned a lot in that role in terms of dealing with a much larger organisation through a concentrated group of stakeholders. So you've got their journey, their digital journey. They have, I think, more than 450, if not 460 branches across the UK. And they're driving, very high success, very high performance with those branches. But actually what they wanted to add to that, not replace, but add to that, was their digital presence. And so re-platforming of their website, looking at their CRM system, and how to essentially turn that around into increasing revenue and incremental revenue was a big part of that role. That presents its challenges in itself, of course, because they are traditionally a retail organisation. And there's a lot of change that has to go on with inside of a business for that to kind of take place. And that's something where I had to start learning in terms of those stakeholders and how to start to look after your people around you and manage that through an organisation, which is a much longer project or piece of work, or it's probably ongoing for years, longer than I was in that post.
Because managing that change is a big task in itself. I mean, yes, bringing the digital element in, but obviously you've got people who that's new to, and in that whole, like, managing that change is quite a big piece of work.
Yeah, it's a massive piece of work, and it's about making sure you've got the right level of influence to do that. And obviously I was brand new to a business who traditionally has had long-standing staff members in that organisation as well. So that's a piece of influence that you have to get over as well, in terms of gaining your influence and building that influence up. But yeah, for a long time, obviously, they have operated as predominantly retail, and within that, and its strength, there's a lot of kind of like drama that goes on in terms of statements around the high street's dead, and everybody's booking online, and there's these big statements of like young people book online, and all these different big like wild statements that people come out with around digital. And I think that actually causes quite a lot of fear to people to when that change does happen, because actually a lot of it's not true. I mean, if you look at the Hayes travel business, it proves that the high street's not dead, and it proves that there's a place for everything correctly in a business. And actually, when it comes to digitising some of that, it's about the customer journey, and that's where it becomes more complex in terms of, like, it's not just young people that want to book online. It's everybody that wants to book online, and people want to be able to sometimes talk to somebody, and sometimes they don't want to talk to somebody. Sometimes they want to have things explained to them. Like, for me personally, I always use this example, but like I've never been to Asia, so if I wanted to book a trip to see the sights of Asia, for example, and that's a huge place, but if I wanted to see the sights of Asia, yeah, I am going to be more comfortable going and speaking to an Asia specialist in a branch rather than trying to do all the research myself online and pulling it all together. I'll still probably do that, but there'll be a guidance from an agent inside a branch, and I think that's got real value still. And that's something from like the board that was a real directive in that digital experience, is how do we have that for people online, not necessarily to the depth, but have that real customer care value online, as well as just being able to serve holidays.
So that gets back to the point that you raised earlier about the psychology market, and that's because ultimately, whatever element, whether it's online, in store, it's about people and the psychology of people, and so that's really, if you understand that, then you understand where to be targeting them.
Exactly, and where to target them, when to target them, to what level, and everybody's an individual. So like understanding what people do need on the whole and trying to offer that service. Whereas, yourself, like if you go into branch and you don't, I say an agent that's in a branch doesn't just have one personality to every single customer. Like, they'll adapt that personality, but digitally that's much harder to do. And of course, like, one of the things that actually came out incredibly positive for Hayes was their customer service throughout the pandemic, and is the fact that they were, they really were helping people that were either stuck or had, holidays booked or didn't quite know what to do when the restrictions were in place. And for that, they got a lot of recognition around their customer service, and that's something that they really didn't they didn't want to lose. Replicating that online is incredibly difficult to do.
Mm.
And that's where like the customer journey and like the change management side of retail to digital, something like that actually really helps, because it's a good piece to highlight to the retail network, to say, like, look, people who want this can't actually get what they need online, so they are still going to come in to branch, and there is still value in the connected journey of offline to online or online to offline.
So with that, the Hayes role, sort of, how did that, because obviously that's what you're doing now is different to that. So
Yeah.
what was the transition from there into where you are now?
So at Hayes, enjoying that job. Like, it was a hard job, and in terms of just where I was, like, quite a hard time with my personal life as well. And I got presented with, again, another opportunity, which was more of a business opportunity than it was actually in marketing. And that was the first time really in my career I'd considered something like that. And I moved to Silverbeam, which is a specialist affiliate marketing agency, to come in with the background I'd got in clients, to look at this kind of solutions and operations for an enterprise side to their business. So typically clients that had affiliate marketing programs in 2 or more territories. So, like the UK, Germany, France, it could be Europe, it could be the US, it could be Australia, anywhere really that's multiple territory, and what that needed to look like from an operations perspective, as well as then kind of being able to sit around the table with some big clients who perhaps are having strategy days around their e-commerce or around their broader digital, and then connect that into the affiliate strategy. So that was kind of the twofold to my role there at Silverbean, and that definitely showed me quite a lot, putting use to how like behind the scenes it worked from a client side, and what that needed to kind of look like when it was working with agencies. Because although I'd started at agency, I'd obviously been quite junior and not really needed to think about certain things, of course. So that was a really interesting role, and it did teach me quite a lot in terms of how to operate, and from that point of view. And then from there, just in terms of a different direction, in the middle of 2024, I lose track of years, but 2024, I went into launching my own business, and that's my business now, Literally Marketing, which is obviously looking at consultancy. And one of the things that I've taken from, I guess, definitely from Silverbean and also from Hayes, is that enjoyment and thrive on really sitting with a business and understanding what is their objective, what is it that they're trying to achieve, where are they going, what could those challenges actually be, is there anything that's really preventing them, is it just little speed bumps along the way that we need to navigate, and then what that solution needs to look like in terms of marketing, not necessarily a full marketing plan and strategy, but it could be something quite specific around their customer sets, their profiling, the data that sits around them. Like, is it actually that they've got inaccurate or maybe not the best quality data? What do they need in terms of channels? Like, I always look at channels as tools rather than channels. So actually, what do you need in your toolkit to be able to build the house that you want them to build? And equally, that's where I really that problem solving side, definitely come full circle to that. That problem solving side does come into play and come into strength, because like I love sitting with. I used to really enjoy sitting in Hayes. I was fortunate that I got 9 months to be able to experience sitting on in their board meetings, and I used to love just listening to what was going on in the business and just being curious to kind of what was happening in the retail division in their independence group, or you've got the business owner herself, Irene Hayes, sitting in board and talking about her visions and what she's wanting for the business. And that's great exposure when it comes to being able to get the experience of hearing a business's goal, hearing potential challenges, and then actually trying to navigate those and bringing those to, whether it's to market or coming up with ideas or strategies to get towards that end goal. And I think that's similar at Silverbean when you're listening to a client that is talking about their broader e-commerce or broader digital objectives, and what one area of marketing can plug into that specifically, but also how it can benefit and how it can push. That's something that when I've come into my own business is definitely an advantage from that perspective, and having that exposure before, and just being able to sit with now a business owner and ask them all about their business, whether it's just a coffee because it's somebody that I've met at a networking event over coffee and cheese, or one of which, or whether it's for a client that wants to work with me. I am just curious about how different businesses work and what those goals are and how they kind of navigate and what challenges. Every business has challenges and every business has market conditions, and what does that actually need to look like, and where are they kind of taking that on, how are they tackling it?
I think having that curiosity of wanting of wanting that understanding of the challenges that different business are facing and how they've overcome them, or what. It's one of the things with the podcast, with a question I'll ask you in a moment about the challenges. It's we're interested in knowing what different challenges people have had, how they've overcome them, because you find all of that out, and then you speak to someone else and you can guide them in that way as to how other people have dealt with it. So it's that's what's that curiosity that you have got, and want to understand other elements to the business as well as marketing.
Yeah, definitely. I love going into business and just being able to hear not just marketing, because it's not, marketing touches every area of a business, and it's a pivotal part to most businesses in the sense of it is the front face often of a business. It's the first impression, the first kind of perception that somebody has of a business. So it's really important that it represents all, and going in and actually finding out what's happening in finance, what's happening in HR, like what's happening in sales and what's happening in IT and every different department of a business, because actually each, just like markets, just like I built when I had in-house roles, like you build your own plan and your own roadmap for the year ahead or years ahead. Each of those departments also has their own roadmap and plans. So actually understanding those and how they all lead to the ultimate business goal, that's like they're all pieces of the same jigsaw, right? You're just working on, say, the blue pieces or the yellow pieces or whatever piece, the corner pieces, whatever it is that you're working on. Like that's just, it all goes together as one final piece towards that business. And I am curious, like I do, like as people often say, you ask so many questions or too many questions, but I don't think you can ask too many questions when it's getting to know a business, especially when it's a new business. I think, it's curiosity, and it's about then the discipline of, okay, what's need to know, what's interest, and what's distraction. And it's those kind of three categories that you then have to be quite disciplined with in terms of, okay, this is need to know, this is what I need to know to be able to drive forward. Then there's the interest point, and then it's obviously getting rid of the distraction points around that as well.
Yeah. Well, so taking the step from the corporate world to self-employment and get your own agency going, that's a big step. What challenges that, of which I'm sure there's numerous, but key challenges that you faced in that?
Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge, isn't it? Like everybody that's done it or everybody that's thinking of doing it can kind of see those challenges coming. But I think for the biggest one, for me, being I am such a structured and planned and kind of considered person, that I think the biggest thing for me was, it was the first time, last July was the first time in my life that I had no structure in my life at all. Like I had nothing that created that structure for me on a daily basis, from school to uni to jobs. Like I've never not had that structure. And that's obviously just in a career sense. And there's a couple of other bits in life going on as well that just meant everything was kind of whipped away from underneath me. That's drama of a statement, but like it felt like everything was whipped away. And I would describe July to September as a nice summer that I worked part-time, because I did what I did and I sort of enjoyed myself at the same time. But it's very, very easy. It's too easy just to drift. So setting up your own business and coming into it well, that's something that I've really taken the learning of creating your own structure, like sitting down, looking at what you want to achieve in quite a holistic way, like all elements of life, including the business, but including me as a career, as two separate tracks within that as well, and then defining kind of what do you need to achieve to reach those goals. And while structure is probably the thing that I've now put back in to my life overall, I think one of the things I found really quite hard was separating my business and what I wanted as a career goal, essentially. And I think that's where, like, I do take it really I find it very hard to do the things I've just spent, I don't know, half an hour talking about for my own business. Whereas if it's a different business, and that's something that obviously you and I have worked on in terms of like how to get the right answers out of my thinking and into reality for my business, rather than just looking at other people's business. And that I found really hard to make that translation.
It is sort of that. I think what I'm trying to, there's obviously, as I say and do as I say, not as I do, but it's I suppose to flip on that look at being on the outside in and setting out the processes, and this is what we do, is one thing. Trying to have self-reflection and making that and doing that yourself is another discipline altogether. And it does help to have someone give you those pointers and see it from the outside in, rather than you try to reflect yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I had to really take a step back, and my summer wasn't quite as I described, but that's, it was when you take away all the structure, like for somebody that's never had that happen, like I didn't like the feeling. And then some days I did like the feeling, but putting it back in slowly but surely and self-reflecting to then build that business was key, because like I say, it's too easy just to drift along and not make any real progress with things. And just starting that structure with things that meant a lot to me, like the business means a lot to me. That's definitely not what I'm saying, but things like my sport, my exercise, and making sure I was stringent on those things, the way I was eating, the diet that I was having, the way I was sleeping, like everything that creates that structure baseline that allows me to then build the business. Those things came first, and then the business has been built on top of that, because I think now I've got all that structure back. And well, you probably know, like, you know, I like that structure, and it's back in my life. It's there to be used.
Yeah. And so going forward, the goals for literally marketing and yourself as to what you're looking to achieve going forward. Where's that going to go?
Yeah, so I want to really, this like 2025, I really want to focus on building that consultancy style and working with my clients to support their businesses. And there's, you know, one thing that I'm hugely proud of at the minute is the clients that I have been working with. I've got a really good repeat rate. So I do focus on my relationships. I do focus on, like I say, getting to know that business and understanding and being connected. It's not about, you know, coming in, working on something and going away. It's actually about being connected and ongoing support for that business, whether that's looking at a discovery piece of work that they need to kind of explore, whether it's working with different team structures, or whether it's just, you know, a bit of a sounding board and quite old school consultancy work. I'm kind of there for the businesses that I am in partnership with for all of those things. And I think into 2025, I want to accelerate those and really create that offering for various different businesses. And, you know, whether it's B2C, B2B, different industries, just be there and understand the problems that businesses are facing and supporting them to navigate them.
Brilliant. And one thing that I look at people, and I haven't given you any heads up, so it's thrown something at you here, is anybody who's looking at...
I'm a planned and prepared person.
I know you are, which is why I didn't give you any heads up on it. Anybody who's thinking about getting into marketing and marketing strategy, what would you say, if you pick out one thing, what's the one thing that you think would be a great area for them to focus on?
Just one area.
That's the challenging thing is
one thing as opposed to
most.
I think it is around like the creative thinking. I'm going to use that term because then it allows me to describe different things. I think the curiosity to get to know, like, don't ever look at marketing in isolation. Be curious about the business and thinking outside the box when you need to kind of to look at a way of doing something, and not just to do it for doing sake, but actually looking up and out to ensure that that strategy that you are building, you can kind of go on to think around challenges. If you've got a business that's been in the market for a very long time, it's not really evolved or changed, you have to think quite creatively in terms of then what that's actually going to look like in terms of a strategy to get that change or to get that shift up in gear. And I think that's where creative thinking really comes in. It doesn't mean necessarily visuals or, big garish kind of creativity, but think creatively around the way that you're doing things and be curious. Definitely be curious.
Brilliant. That was a great way of being able to get a few things. That was great.
Yeah. A great marketeer for words.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, look, thank you very much for sharing that. I think there's some great nuggets in there for people to pick up on, and so I really appreciate your time and you coming on and sharing that with us.
Yeah, I had a really good time. Thank you.
Superb. Thanks Sophie, and
right.
Speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.